purpose of this video is to give some instruction on where all the parts go and the assembly order for installing a clutch basket in an SV1000 or DL1000 Suzuki. It's not a complicated job, but there are some steps to it that I think some video and picture work will help people that have not done it before, and that's what we're going to try to do here. Now obviously I've shortcutted quite a few steps here by having this engine out of the bike. We're going to assume you have all the coolant and oil drained and all that stuff to get to it out of the way. This is your radiator hose here. It'll have to come off and drain your coolant. There's a small rubber hose behind it for the thermostat bypass. That has to come off, and then there's another rubber hose that's the crankcase vent. Those three have to come off. If you don't have a foot peg lowering kit on a DL, you'll have to take your foot pegs loose over here to get to some of the back bolts. And there's some other steps, but I'll leave those for another time. Working on getting your clutch cover off, there's three different lengths of bolts here, and I thought I'd show those. There's a short bolt, this length right here, that's around these lower areas down through here, and one of them right here in the center right there. There's medium length bolts. These go here, here, and here. These are also the same length bolt here, but do not remove those. There's no reason to remove the water pump when doing a clutch basket installation. So just leave these two bolts here. That'll keep the water pump fast to the clutch cover. Just leave them alone. They don't need to be moved. So you got medium bolts here, here, and here. Then you've got two long bolts. They go here and here. Now this one is set back in more than this one. It looks like it should be a short bolt, but because of the dowel pin, the threads are further back in, so it goes in correctly there as well as correctly here. So those are your three different length bolts right there. You can get an idea of which are which right there. So put them out of the way for the moment. You're ready to remove the cover, which may take a little prying. Of course, I've got this one already loosened up, so let's get it off. You'll have a little bit of oil and gum in there. You can take and clean your surface of the gasket surfaces up. Now that you're inside of it, this is what you're going to see. This is the crankshaft. Make sure that this bolt or nut is tight and that this washer and all looks in good shape. These can come loose on some engines. Usually they'll rough up the back of the clutch basket when that happens, so kind of look for that. This is the cam drive gear. This is also this slot. That's what drives the water pump. Now on a DL, you've got a pressure plate with 5 springs in it. The SV has 6 smaller ones, but that really doesn't matter on how you're installing them. I've just got this one in here for now. Now these are pretty long bolts because the springs are pretty long. Springs are much heavier in a DL than an SV because it doesn't have the back torque limiter. It's called, actually applies pressure to the clutch under acceleration. With that loose, now you've got 5 of these normally, of course. These are all the same. You don't have to worry about what order they're in. Just lay them off to the side with the others. Then you've got the pressure plate. Comes right off. Now a lot of times this real thin steel washer will stay fast to the back of the pressure plate with an oil film. That's fine. Then you've got this Torrington bearing. It goes on top of that. Then you've got the push rod that's activated by the hydraulic clutch system. That sets against that bearing. Set those together like that's a good way to leave them. Then we've got our clutch plates to get loose. Have you a clean place to lay these out. Now, these will have a film of oil on them. Everything will have a little bit of oil on them. Doesn't hurt a thing. That's what it needs to operate. Don't worry about cleaning them up. It won't help them. Just put them back in the way they come out. Now just grab some of these tangs on these clutch plates and pull them out. Now the outside edge, just lay them down the way they come out. Now you may need a tool or something to get some more of these loose where you can get to them. But again, the way they come out is the way you lay them down. Well, you don't have to worry about sequence on them or anything. They're ready to go. Okay, now we've got one more fiber left in there. That's the only one that stands out as being different. If you don't get them mixed up, it don't matter. This one's easy to figure out. This one has a much narrower face on it. That's made to leave room for the washers behind it. There's a large Belleville washer beveled. The outside edge is raised off the back of the hub, so when it's installed you want this outside edge taller than the back. It goes on like a bowl. Just lay that right there, and then there'll be a little steel washer behind that that just protects the aluminum hub from that. It's the same on both sides. It can be left right there. And one of the hardest things about the job is getting this nut off, and you need a good clutch holding tool to do it properly. And of course, sometimes they just don't go in there just like they should till you get them just right. Now you can hold that. I use an air impact wrench more often than not, and use what you need. You're going to put it in gear and have somebody help you hold it if you're doing it manually. But there's also going to be a little peen down there. This nut has a flange on the outside edge of it. That's meant to be peened down into that shaft, the splines in the shaft. So you got to lift that up. Make you a little bit of a tool, of an old screwdriver, whatever you've got. Lift that up as best you can. You don't have to get it perfect. This shaft is hardened steel. The nut is not hardened on these edges here, so it will help lift that up off and not damage the threads. But get it up as best you can, and then get the nut off. Obviously, have this finger tight for the video, but it'll come right off once you get it loosened. Lay it off to the side. Now behind it is another Belleville washer. Unlike the one in the hub, you want the raised area, which is in the center, to be facing outward. So we'll lay those off to the side right there. And there will be another washer. Again, this one will usually stick to the hub also with an oil film. It's just a flat hardened steel washer. So once you've got all that stuff loose, you can remove your tool. Off comes the hub. Sometimes those have to be welded a little bit to get them off, but sometimes not. Set that off to the side. Now your clutch basket's right here, but you've still got one more big thick washer that has to come off. Lay that off to the side, and you're ready to remove your clutch basket. Just give that a little pull. It should come right off, and you may have some stuff come with it. This bearing and this sleeve, now when you buy a brand new basket, you get this sleeve new from Suzuki with it. You do not get a new bearing. And speaking of this bearing, early on in production they changed this bearing to one that appears to have slots free of the rollers, like they were lost and got lost in the engine. This is correct. You do not have to worry about that. A brand new bearing has these same two slots empty. It's correct. I don't know why, but it's okay. So no worries there. There's also a big washer back here that may come off when you're working on it. It's they're all purple looking from the heat treatment. The DL has a beveled edge on it that comes to the outside. The SV is a little bit different, but again, they're just a great big thick washer. Probably won't come off when you're doing the basket anyway. Now, the most important thing I can address is this gear on the back of the clutch basket. That drives the oil pump. This is the oil pump for the engine. When you buy a new basket from Suzuki, it does not have this gear on it. When you get a modified clutch basket from WERKS parts, it too will not have that gear installed when you receive it. You have to put that gear on off your old basket. And it has a dowel pin in it. It goes in this hole right here. This little dowel pin goes in that hole, and then this gear just slides right down over it. Now it's got a thicker lip on the bottom that goes down right there, and then your snap ring goes on top of that to hold it in place. Couldn't be any simpler, but you have to do that or it will ruin your engine. Now, once you've got that all done, basket's been swapped over, you've got your gear on it. A couple of things you can look at here. There's a screen at the bottom of the engine. This is just a screen for the oil pump to keep large debris out of it. It's narrower on one end than the other. It's also got this black dot in the middle. One side of it has a little bump on it that's raised higher than the other one. That goes up, and the narrow end goes in first. So just clean that off. There will always be stuff on it, just debris from when the engine was new. Slide that back in, you're done with that. Clean up your gasket surfaces, and you're ready to start going back together. You want to put your sleeve, if it came off, back on first. Then you want to put your roller bearing. If you put a new one on or something, or had them all cleaned up, you'd want to put some oil on that to protect it. Next up is the basket. I'm just going to reinstall this old one, but the process is the same. Now, one thing you want to pay attention to is this oil pump gear. That's important as the third step to get it in. Also, the cam gear is spring loaded. Two halves of that gear, the teeth are not lined up. That's so to keep the engine a little bit quieter when it's running. So when you start to slide the basket up on here, it's easy to engage the first set of teeth on this smaller outer gear. But you have to turn the basket counterclockwise while you push in a little bit to engage the rest of them. Well, you'll notice it didn't go in very far, yet it's still engaging both sets of gears. That means your oil pump gear is not lined up with the teeth on the basket. So stick your finger in here about 5 o'clock. You can move that gear a little bit, and usually it'll let you know when it's just right. The basket will just pop right in place. Or not. There we go. And once it's installed correctly, the inner hub and the hub on the basket will be pretty much level. If it's not, don't force anything. Wiggle this gear back here. This oil pump gear, when you put your finger back there and it's correctly installed, you've got a little bit of play in it, but you can tell the teeth are engaged. It's very important to make sure that gear doesn't rotate freely. If it does, your basket's not all the way on. Do not force the basket. People have broken that gear trying to force the basket on. It does not take force to do anything in here. It's just a matter of getting everything to line up real good. Once it's installed, everything's level here, you're good to go. You can start going back together. You want to put your big, thick, steel, silver-colored washer on first. Then you want to slide your hub on. Now, sometimes these don't want to go on to get them just right. They're a pretty precise machining on these, so you got to get them just right. Now, okay, that went on right like it should. You put a flat hardened steel washer on next. You put the beveled washer, again the inside is the raised part that goes to the outside. Put that on like that. Put your nut back on it. Torque that to spec, and then you want to peen down an area between the raised splines to lock it in place just like it was from the factory. Now if you have an SV, the hub looks a little different. It's got a little different setup with the back torque limiter, but the hub installs the same. The only thing different is the internals. Once you get the hub on, then you have to put this piece in, the ramp, and then you put the center hub in, those parts, and then it goes on just like this basket. You put the same washer and nut on out there, and then the springs and stuff for it are a little different. When you go to put the pressure plate on, there's 6 of them. They're smaller, but they're just as simple as it looks to install them. So really no different than a DL. I won't go into it further right now. Now we've got the nut tightened. Let's assume everything's good to go there. We're starting to assemble the plates again. Remember, the thin steel washer goes on first. It's the same on both sides, so it doesn't matter. Next we have the big spring Belleville washer. The outside edge you want raised away from the back of the basket. So the outside edge is closer to you than the inside edge. That goes in like that. Then you've got the one fiber disc that's very thin. Now since we picked it up off the pile, we know the top edge is the first edge to go in. So that's how we'll install it. Now these take a little patience to get them all in, so bear with me here. There's no real way to shortcut it. You just start feeding them in there. It's really almost impossible to try to do more than one at a time, so I just don't. Putting them in, just if you lay them out right, this is what's so important, to just lay them out. You don't even have to look at them. You just pick them up and put them in. Don't worry about what goes where. Before long, you're getting done. Now, these things almost never need replaced. So don't buy new clutch fibers. They just don't wear out in the DLs or SVs. They're a robust design. They just don't slip. They don't wear. That part of the clutch system is really outstanding in these. Now as we're getting near the end, we'll be coming up to one of the mistakes that's hopefully this video will help owners with, that I see all too often. Actually, a couple mistakes here that are very important to watch. Now, your last disc, which looks like all the other discs, and it is, except that it goes in the short slot instead of the long slot. That's the way the factory does it. I don't know why, but that's the way they do it. So that's the way we put them back together when they decide to. Okay, if you put two of them right here, which it looks like there's room to do, your clutch will slip and it has to come back apart and be put back together correctly. So the last and only the last fiber goes in the short slot. All right, we've done good. We've got that ready to go. The next thing we want to do is put our mushroom shaped push rod back in. Now, I don't tie down the lever on the master cylinder for the clutch. I just let it alone, but sometimes that'll feed out and you have to push this back in with a little bit of force. Just keep steady force on it to go right back in. Next up goes the bearing, and then the smaller steel washer. Again, that should be all the way back. Now, very important, when you go to put this back on, it has teeth in it that must engage with this hub. Must engage with the hub. As you can see, there's a big gap between the end of the basket and the pressure plate. I just happened to put it on in a place where it is not engaging correctly. So you have to rotate that. See it click in place, and notice that the fingers on the basket are very near the outside edge of the pressure plate. That is a correct installation. If you put it together without engaging those splines on this pressure plate, the clutch is always released. It will not engage, it will not pull the bike away. You're stranded until you can fix that. Now, I'm just going to put one back in here again for display purposes, but I want to show you something else that we run into sometimes here when helping owners. Now, as you can see, this is not a very big bolt. The way the washer's set up on it there, it's a long bolt, and it goes all the way until this bottoms out. And when it does, it just hits solid. You can tell it's all the way bottomed out because there's really very little tension against it. What I want to show you is you're tightening this down, and there's no real sequence to doing it. I do it kind of like you would a car tire or something, but when I'm doing them, but it really don't matter. When you get near the end, this will just stop all of a sudden. Right there. See how abrupt that is? That's bottomed out. Very important to just snug that. That was about 1/8 of a turn. That's all you want on that. It's like 7 pounds-feet, and most of us do not have a torque wrench that accurate. I implore you to just snug it. These get broken many times. Ruins your day. Now that we've got all that together and everything looks good, we know our basket's lined up right because we haven't used any force. Everything's looking good back here. The gear's locked in. Next thing up is putting the cover back on. We've got to put a gasket on it first. Only use the Suzuki gasket. It has a graphite coating on both sides. It also has sealant around the water ports to seal it correctly. Do not put sealer on the gasket surfaces, either one of them. It's contained in this gasket. It works very, very well. There are gaskets available that are not Suzuki OEM, and they're not worth the time to take and put them on. They're junk. Now, we'll assume we've got this lined up just like this. That's how it goes on right there. Now, the next thing you got to worry about, and about the last thing, is your water pump. Remember, this is your water pump drive, and this is your driven shaft. What you want to do with this, since that's like a screwdriver blade, the shape of it, it just engages in that slot, as simple as that. You want to hold this up in the approximate position it goes on, and we'll say that this one's almost exactly in the 12 o'clock position. We want to move this thing back and forth till it's also in the 12 o'clock position. And now we're ready to put the cover back on. We'll assume the gasket's already on there. You've got 2 dowel pins here to help line it up. So kind of work towards them first. Get this top one on first. Get the other one started. And if you've got this lined up properly, it goes on that easy. No more force than that right there. If it doesn't go on, it's not lined up right. to put it back together finally, remember our bolts are smaller bolts here, 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 2 of them back here, then this one right here. Our medium length bolts, 3 of them, 1, 2, 3. Those go in there where the water pump is. Then we've got 2 long bolts. These go here and here. Now once you've got that all together, it's time to put oil in it, time to put coolant back in it. You can put coolant back in it with a long hose and a funnel on top, run it right into the radiator till it fills up, a little bit runs out, put your cap on, then refill the reservoir or add a little bit to it to where it's a little bit over the full mark, 3/4 of an inch, ½ inch, something like that, because you're going to have air in that system. When you start the engine, if you want to take a short ride on it, after check for oil leaks and all that kind of stuff, don't go very far, because it's pretty common to have a little air pocket in them and they'll show that they're getting hot. If you just want to idle it around locally or something, run it till you can feel heat in the radiator hose coming up through here. That means the thermostat is opened. Once the thermostat is open, it means water and coolant's flowing through there. You can bring it back and shut it down and let it cool. When it cools, it'll suck coolant out of the reservoir and replace the air that was in the system. Once that's done, look the bike over, inspect all your work, look for leaks or any other problems, and you should be good to go.